Okay, I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting tonight. This is a regular meeting. The time is 5:30 and it's May 5th, 2026. The land that we know as Sequim was once inhabited solely by the peoples known as the S'Klallam people, represented by the three tribal governments, Lower Elwha S'Klallam, Jamestown S'Klallam, and Port Gamble S'Klallam. We serve as stewards of the land within the city of Sequim with the same care and consideration the S'Klallam tribes has and continues to provide. This acknowledgement is a respect to the S'Klallam people and their history. The Planning Commission serves as an advisory body to the City Council. The purpose of the Planning Commission is to provide guidance and direction for Sequim's future growth through the continued review and improvement to Sequim's comprehensive plan, zoning code, shoreline management, environmental protection, and related land use documents. The Planning Commission will have all of the powers and perform each and all of the duties specified by Chapter 35A.63 RCW as amended and set forth or amended by ordinance. Roll call. Will you please take roll call, noting that Commissioner Cummings is absent tonight and it's excused?
Thank you. Commissioner Kuntz.
Present.
Commissioner Fain.
Present.
Commissioner Habel, I see online. There, you gave me a thumbs up. Commissioner Hueth.
Here.
Commissioner Lefevre.
Here.
And Commissioner Mahalik.
Here.
Thank you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes. This would be the minutes from the regular Planning Commission meeting on April 21st, 2026. Has the commission had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, are there any corrections? Yes.
I would move that Emily's name be removed. She can't attest to the signatures. She wasn't here. So whoever was the secretary at the time. Yes.
We can make that happen. Thank you.
With that correction, I move to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Minutes stand approved with the correction. Public comment. General public comment will be heard at this time. Each person is limited to 3 minutes. For those wishing to speak on a public hearing topic, which we do not have tonight, please hold those comments until that portion of the meeting. So if there's anybody that would like to offer public comment, it would be in this part of the meeting right now. And seeing nobody present in the room, is there anybody online that would like to provide public comment?
Yes, Commissioner Kuntz. Mr. Worthington has got his hand raised.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Worthington, we're ready for you to provide public comment.
John Worthington Sequim. Last week, I came in and talked about Bell Creek, and I made and thanks for letting me give my 2 cents on that. Tonight, it's a little shorter. I've noticed after looking at the irrigation map that we have the flexibility to keep Bell Creek open year round. It needs investment. I can see through the irrigation map that with just a minimal amount of investment, we could have a year-round Bell Creek flow and give Silvers and Kings a fighting chance. There are hard decisions to make, but Johnson Creek is 20% grade. Spawning is 3 to 5% grade. We can't continue to spend that kind of money and on a 20% spawning grade, and it gets worse as it goes up. So there's just no chance of Silvers and Kings and barely any chance for Chum on Johnson Creek. It's a stormwater valve. But I didn't know when I testified to you before that the irrigation maps is full of places where the East Highland irrigation ditch empties into Johnson Creek. And the decision, Smith Lake, that's also part of both Johnson Creek and Bell Creek. So the logical solution would be to block off the Johnson Creek end of Smith Lake. And all of a sudden, I got year-round water in Bell Creek. And in exchange for probably just maintaining the East Highland irrigation ditch and upgrading the system up there, this is something that could be done if the county and Squim and the tribe just got together and decided we want Silver and Kings, darn it. We don't want just a Chum game plan. Or if you call 20% grade even a legitimate spawning ground. I sent you some emails. I hope you read them. I'll continue to push on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Worthington. Is there anybody else online that would like to provide public comment? Okay, thank you. Then at this point, I will close the public comment section of this meeting, and we will move on to general business, which is the agenda packet, comprehensive plan scheduled status update.
Yes, planning commissioners. So as always, we just do a quick check-in on our schedule. As you know, you've been waiting for me to get more information on our functional plans, our transportation master plan, and our sewer consultant work, so I can flesh out the rest of our schedule. I will note that we did receive on April 30th, so last week, the hoped for deliverables from our two consultants. So staff is reviewing them right now and hopefully determining that they are where we need them to be to continue moving forward. The sewer memo has been reviewed by engineering as well as myself. There's just a few nuances that I'm going to ask for. So I feel like the sewer we're able to move forward with that. So the transportation master plan had more things for us, more corrections and revisions and clarifications that were asked for, and I'm hoping to get that review this week. So hopefully at our next meeting, I'll have more dates on the schedule for you, but so far we're still, the consultants are delivering on the dates that they were requested to deliver on. So again, I will hopefully have more information for what the rest of our summer is going to look like at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does the commission have any questions or comments? No? Okay, so let's move on to new business, which is the SMC Title 18 zoning update.
I'll give Scott a second to pull slideshow up. But yeah, we're just we're moving our way through the Title 18 zoning update. Again, as of right now, we're just kind of talking about key concepts and ideas before we release the actual draft. Just kind of doing our, like I said, final check in with you all to make sure that we're moving in the right direction and that everything is kind of where we understand it to be and think we need to go. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide there, Scott. So tonight, we're going to talk about site plans, design review, off-street parking, and open space and landscaping, and just some of the concepts that come with that. So the focus for tonight is site design and development updates. All right, go ahead and go to the next. So the first is site plans, which in SQUIM currently as a standalone process does not exist. It is incorporated into design review, which is locked behind new construction. So the only time we are really able to do site plan review on is when there is a new build happening. So if somebody wanted to do, updates or just maybe some rehab to a site or whatever, we wouldn't have a site plan permit for them to apply for. And if they weren't doing new construction, there really isn't a process for us to tell them to follow. So the purpose for site planning is to establish site plan review to ensure development is compatible, safe, logical, consistent with SQUIM's plans, policies, and development regs. So the example up here is it's a site plan that we did get through design review, but generally this is what we expect to receive when we do standalone site plans. You're going to get a site. To say it a lot, site plan, a map, a drawing, an illustration of an aerial of the site that shows things like how traffic's going to move through the site, how it's going to interact with the roadway, how pedestrian flows are going to be provided. And you'll get different iterations of the site plan for things like landscaping and utilities and of the such. So here we have a commercial car wash site plan. So it's got a number of things going on, and so these are really the important things that we want to capture through a site plan. But let's say in the future, this project wanted to add, maybe an accessory structure that didn't meet the need of design review, but we wanted to capture it somehow. They could do a site plan review, or if they wanted to update the landscaping, we could have them update landscaping through a site plan review. So it's one of those things that, as it exists today, we are a bit hindered by our current code's inability to enforce site plan review without new construction that needs design review. So it's a major gap in today's code, and I'm honestly surprised that it's taken this long for us to put it into code as a standalone process. I've needed it a few times and haven't been able to use it. So this is something that I'm really looking forward to, and that I think will make our lives and potential developers' lives easier. So the impact here is it gives the city a primary tool for coordinating how development functions on the ground by tying project approval to adequate access, infrastructure, utilities, frontage improvements, landscaping, and site safety. And again, another kind of tie back to our Title 17 update is for some multifamily attached housing where binding site plans are no longer required, because you can do condominiums through the state without getting a binding site plan, they would still have to get a site plan. So it may not be a BSP, but it would just be a site plan review, and then they could go and condo that through the state. So another way of us fully baking or fully putting the puzzle pieces together and not leaving anything kind of unturned. So yeah, go ahead.
Do you have to have the lighting with the site plan?
Like as part of your lighting plan? Yeah. So like a photometric plan?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So that is something that we'll want to be, I think, a little bit more specific about on what we want from a photometric plan, because current code makes reference to it in design review, but then does not really say what it needs to entail. It just says you need to include a photometric plan. So when we do put the code together, we'll put some more actual kind of meat on that bone of what does that mean? Like what do we truly want to see? The big thing is obviously reducing spillover glare, putting some lighting standards in place, downward shielded. And then site planning, again, there are lighting standards in today's code that are in design review, but if you're not doing new construction and you're replacing lights, but you're not subject to design review, where does the city get to enforce, updates to lights? So again, this will help us navigate that as well. So, yeah. Oh yeah. So and Carla did remind me we'll have a minor site plan as well for just smaller improvements that don't need, to submit a full one of these potentially, or maybe there's an existing one and a modification just triggers the need for a minor site plan as opposed to a full blown. So there will be a kind of a tiered review system there. So
Okay, thank
any
you.
other questions on site planning?
Yeah. Does this add a new level or new requirement on people revamping their properties or rezoning or repurposing things
So
that they didn't have to do before?
n-
Or do they usually have something like this
I-
for the contractors?
Yeah, I mean, so it is true that site planning does happen kind of organically through land use review. So if there's a new project coming in, we're doing site plan review. So it's not as if it's not necessarily not happening, but there isn't really a standalone process where we can trigger the site planning requirements without either design review or some type of land division process that goes with it. What this does is it does allow us to have site planning standards and requirements for the long haul. So there may be, properties out there that are existing that want to make improvements or make changes that can go through a site plan review where we may not have in the past had a trigger for them to come in and get a permit or get a review. So to answer your question, is there more here than there once was? Yes, but that is intentional. So it does give the city a little bit more authority, I think is probably the right way to put that.
Okay,
Go
thank
ahead,
you. Oh,
Dennis.
yes, Dennis.
And I appreciate the tiered approach.
Uh-huh.
On your more intensive site plan reviews, will you have other departments also
Yes.
required to look at
Oh,
like
yeah.
safety issues
Yeah,
and that type of thing?
so one of the big things that in the draft that, again, I know you guys can't see it. I did take a lot of, so design review in its current state in today's code is effectively site planning and building design all under one. And there's things in design review as it relates to frontage improvements, access, fire, all of the things, right? And so that basically just got picked up and moved into this new chapter, and then design review, as we'll come to know it, will focus mainly just on building design. And so site planning will be all the other stuff. And then in addition to that, there are things from land division standards, not all of them, but for things like frontage improvements, like if you're not going through a full land division process, but you're doing a site plan for commercial development, there could be frontage improvements that you need to do. So those are also going to be incorporated with kind of the same discretion where Public Works and the engineering team has some, they have the discretion on what and when that's kind of stuff's required. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this before we move on? Okay, thanks.
All right, so next is kind of the second half of that, and this is design review, which is currently is the main point of site plan review that we do. But what the future design review will be is more architectural standards, building design standards. It's taking out the site planning portion of it and just really focusing on the actual visual appearance of buildings themselves. So it establishes the objective design standards for commercial, industrial, mixed use, and larger multifamily, which is going to be 5 units or more, which is similar to what is in code today, to promote high quality, durable, and compatible building designs. Now, I will say that there are some standards in the current code that have given some developers not necessarily a challenge, but the administration of them has been difficult in terms of like, what does that mean? What does that look like? So an emphasis that we're really trying to do is we're trying to put together, it's prescriptive and it's objective, and it's things where if you do this, then this is how you reach approval. It's not it. And there's been a lot of updates from the state as it relates to how cities can regulate design review. And so you really have to put something together that is, here are the standards by which you need to meet in order to satisfy this. So you can't kind of lean into being super vague. We're getting away, not that the city currently does it, but the design review boards of years past where it was very subjective, or, you had a group of individuals kind of weighing in on how a building should look on a case by case is going away a bit. And it is more of a focus on, here are your objective standards, and then here's how you reach approval. What that means is we have to come up with those objective standards, and we have to put that into a code that is usable. So some of the things that we're looking at is some core design standards, avoiding blank walls and facades, providing distinct articulation of your walls, having entrances that are very visible, screening where necessary, pedestrian scale features, roof variation, and then an overarching emphasis on Pacific Northwest architecture and design. How that's done is through, all of kind of the things that I've just mentioned, but then even more specifically colors, leaning into earth tones, neutral colors, natural materials, and things that really resonate with where we live. And so that'll be kind of more on or I guess that'll be the focus of the updated code. And then also, just making sure things like, if somebody wants to repaint their building, maybe we can still have some authority on what it gets painted to, which we're still kind of sorting that one out. But we're trying, we want to be thoughtful with how SQUIM is going to develop and also redevelop. And so we want to be very precise with what we're doing. So I will add that there are certain things and certain development types that we'll have sort of release valves on. So if you think like industrial buildings and industrial uses, sometimes it'll be a lot harder for those types of uses to hit the, it'd be hard to make a warehouse look kind of like this building, or to make a large retail box store look like a have a bunch of articulations and roof forms and things. So there are going to be some release valves that we're considering for different types of uses where, hey, maybe you don't have to meet the full extent, or maybe the numerical standards get a little bit bigger so the spacing can be farther out, but then maybe that means they have to provide more landscaping. Maybe that means they'd have to provide more screening, or whatever it might be as a trade-off to not hit the full standard there. So, and then again, some of the stuff on here is there is still some site integration on this. So lighting, storage, loading, trash, fencing, as those do have materials, and they are more of a design element to some extent than maybe necessarily a site planning. So these two things will play together. So design review and site planning will happen together, even though we are separating them into two distinct processes. If you're going to come in for a design review application, you're also going to do a site planning application. Okay. So the impact here is shaping both the appearance and site design of qualifying development by requiring more intentional building form, materials, facade treatment, screening, and pedestrian-oriented design, while giving ourselves clear and objective framework for that review. So go ahead.
No. Can you go over what zone?
Oh, yeah. So I think I mentioned it, that it would mainly be commercial, industrial, mixed use, and larger multifamily. So single family would not, and then multiplexes up to 4 units would not. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry if I missed that, but that's number one. I just wanted to make sure, because I know a lot of times people are like, are you telling us how our houses are to look? And so I wanted to make sure that it's clear that that's not what the architectural design standards are going to be. I also just wanted to note too, that when our team and our consultants, Leland Consulting, had our listening sessions with our affordable housing providers, that they all mentioned design review as a bane of their. No, I mean, they are not fans of design review, and it's because oftentimes wall articulation, modulation, and extra doodads cost more money, and so they were wanting to be exempt from design review. What we have not, I don't think we've exempted them, but there is a provision that was in the code that you guys, we went through earlier this year, that is on the books now, that they can ask for relief from that as part of their affordable housing exceptions opportunity, that they can ask the city council for relief from any development standard, actually, pretty much, except there's just very few that they cannot. So I just wanted to note that too, that for any of our nonprofit or housing authority that may have a project that might qualify or under architectural design review, that they do have a pathway to seek relief from any standards that they feel are would be keeping them from being able to achieve affordability.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody? Yes, go ahead, Larry.
Just as a follow-up on that, I've lived in other areas where affordable housing kind of looked like army barracks. So the city will still kind of say, okay, you can cut back, but you gotta maybe screen it out or do something. It's not just a blank check to.
I think
It's
that's certainly what we would want to do. Yes.
I mean, I would certainly recommend that because I have seen it be very rudimentary.
Yep.
And that may not go with the vision for the city of being small town.
Correct.
So I would endorse that.
Thank you.
Yes, Dennis.
Could you explain maybe a little bit more detail, the marriage between design review and site plan? I mean, you mentioned design review. If you came in to maybe change your color of your commercial structure, would that trigger a site plan as well?
No, like, so site planning would certainly be the site features outside of the building. So whereas design review would be the building itself, site planning would be, if you wanted to update your parking lot, if you're a commercial development that has a parking area and you needed to maybe add more spaces or wanted to add additional landscaping, or let's say like you get a new tenant in there and now the use here triggers the need for, let's say, a loading zone for whatever reason. Those are the kinds of things that we would expect to see through site planning, whereas that may, to some degree, like a loading zone is probably a good example of where, maybe it does have an impact both on building design and site plan, where you would come in, you would get both.
Okay.
But there are certainly going to be instances where, you just want to add, maybe a roof feature, or you want to change the color of a building, or you want to just spruce it up a bit.
That would be design review.
Could be design review. And not every remodel or alteration to a facade is going to require design review, maybe in the fullest extent, which is another thing that we're wrestling with right now, is like, what is that threshold that allows us to do or to apply design review to redevelopment, because the state has some restrictions on when it can and can't be done. And then as it relates to site planning, we just want the ability to have a seat and say, like, all right, this is how this has to go, and make sure that we're getting all of the things that we need for fire safety, for traffic control as necessary, so that it doesn't just end up not functioning the way that it should. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Karen.
There would need to be a little bit of restriction, because you do have in here earth tone colors for the buildings. So if this building decided it wanted to be bright pink and yellow and sell balloons,
Yeah.
You would need some sort of
Correct.
tool
Yep.
in there.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah, and so the one nice thing is that, like, a project like this that is subject to design review is, once you have an approved design review plan, that is good forever in the sense that that is the plan you are working against or with for the rest of that building's duration. So obviously we don't have design review on every building in town. So the emphasis on the colors and repainting of existing buildings is going to be more on these long-standing buildings that maybe don't have a site plan or a design review approval. And so then it is us trying to figure out what's that, how do we enforce that and go from there. Yeah. Yeah. We're like,
Yeah.
we're figuring it out, but I totally agree. We would not want a pink and yellow building. At least I don't.
Yes, Dennis.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on that, saying what would be the trigger for a property owner to come in for design review if they were just going to paint their structure bright pink?
Yeah. And that's, I have some draft language that would essentially make it so. But if they don't know and then they paint it a color they're not supposed to, is the city do we have the capacity or desire to do code enforcement on that sort of thing? Because that's where that would go.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And one more question. So the DRB is disbanded. Okay.
Yes, and it has been for as long as I've been here. So
Okay.
it's just been administrative design review, which I believe is becoming more of the norm for most commercial buildings. And I think specifically redevelopment, it's becoming more of the norm as well, is that it should be an administrative design review. I think multifamily absolutely has to be administrative. I don't think residential can go to design review boards anymore. I think that's a requirement.
Right.
So
Okay,
and
thank you.
Squim's just hasn't had one, like I said, since I've been here. So
Okay, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to go first, Alex?
Thanks. Actually, this building is an interesting example. It being nature's gifts, I think. Are there standards on signage? Because it doesn't seem to have a sign. And also, is there a standard for a street number for the sake of emergency vehicles, deliveries, and customers finding?
yeah, so those would be addressed in the sign code, and there is a requirement for commercial buildings to have their property addresses displayed. So I think you can see this one on the corner there. There's an address number, I believe, on the right side there. But
Okay.
yeah, so sign permits, if they wanted a sign, they'd have to come and get one through the sign code. I don't believe there's a requirement that they have to have a sign. But we can talk about that.
Okay. And okay. You mentioned colors and earth tones, which I think that's a really good idea to have
We don't want to call it a theme, but
a certain
kind of
a certain theme for
a palette. Yeah, there you
for
go.
downtown or something. Then if Safe Flight, for instance, the glass place said, "Oh, we're gonna paint our place black,"
Mhm.
or would that have run into an obstacle there?
Black's a tough one because it's not an earth tone, but it is very harsh. I think is probably so that I mean, and again, and that wrestles with the kind of the thing we were just talking about, where you have an existing building that probably wasn't subject to design review when it was first constructed, and so when do we get a crack at it? Now for that one in particular, I do recall the owners did reach out and ask us if there was anything prior to them painting it, and unfortunately at the time there was not. So there was nothing we could do to stop them, and I don't think it looks too bad actually. The previous building was pretty faded, so I understand they wanted to paint it, but
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious on how subjective the segue will be between like you were talking about having standards and then, there being like a spigot. So let's say that you have a company and maybe it's a chain and maybe it's a local, like a small business, but let's say that their brand is that they, everything is painted pink. How are we going to, like, for instance, and I'm just throwing this out there as far as color themes, but Highway 101 Diner, they're never, and I know that they're not covered under that, but I mean, like, let's say a business like that is coming in and wants to build a building.
Sure.
And their brand is that it's teal and pink and bright yellow. How do we, I mean, I would have a hard time saying no to, something along those lines because their brand isn't earth tones.
Sure.
But everybody loves to eat at, a really good restaurant.
Yeah. And no, and I think that's a good point. And we do have, there are some specifics, at least in the draft, as it relates to brand colors. And so there is relief for like larger corporate branding where, like if you want to incorporate more brand colors, like I said, it would maybe trigger like a trade-off where you have to provide more of this or more of that in order to do and utilize more brand colors. But as it relates to a smaller, I think Carla says she's got something.
No, I can't. Yeah. I mean, it's actually, I just wanted to note your guys' questions are actually really great. This gives us a lot of good feedback to go back on and kind of wrestle with. So branding, the brand colors actually every example you've brought up are like, yeah, those are the hard things for design review. If we're going to be pretty restrictive on the colors, the branding colors will come in accent colors or kind of colors that have a percentage of or a limitation to how it's being applied. And then honestly, the branding comes with the signage. And that's where, first of all, signage is protected under the First Amendment, actually, as free speech. And so we don't actually get to touch too much of the colors of signs. But that's always mine. Like, well, when an applicant's like, well, I need to have, bright pink. I'm like, you can have as much bright pink in your sign as you want. Like, that's where you do your branding. And so there will be a little bit of, I've had large developers that are kind of mad about it, but they, let's just say, and Quick Quack's a great example. I'm like, if you want Travis to kind of walk through, they started with bright green and bright yellow and ended with earth tone colors. And the reason is, oh, you have a question? Is that what? Okay. All right. I'll wrap this up then, but I will say that most commercial developer design review is not like what it was 20 or 30 years ago. Everyone should be familiar with it and should have, especially larger national chains, will have some understanding that they start with what they want and they're prepared to meet what the local jurisdiction is going to ask for with clear and objective standards. It's not this game of, read my mind, guess what I want you to design. Like, we need to tell them what those standards are, and then they need to meet that. So I think the branding, Travis and I can talk more about it. He has some ideas about it, but the bright colors can be incorporated as accents or trim colors, and certainly through their signage.
Okay, thank you. So we'll hear from Will.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure one of the issues with design review, especially on things like outside colors, is the speed of review and the cost. Now, say if you have a business owner and they say, oh, okay, I'm going to paint it sepia tone, a neutral color. How do we make sure a business owner is able to paint their structure or make minor alterations quickly without going through a long process?
Yep.
So I'd almost rather look at a a slightly strange colored building than one that hasn't been painted in years because the owner is worried about the cost of getting a permit and the timeline.
Yeah. So, and to that, the one of the stances that we've taken with recent design is that, like at least for new construction, is that the conditions that we apply to an approval is that the standards need to be met. And so what that, if things can change from the time they get an approval to the time that they actually go to build, maybe that paint color no longer exists, maybe, but it does remain the same that, we still have to have, they still have to meet and satisfy the requirement. So the paint color can change. It just still, it would potentially need to be reviewed. I mean, I don't think there's any way to get around not reviewing it if we want to have kind of some control over colors.
Is there the possibility of allowing a business owner to repaint with the same color that they were approved for, or as close as possible,
Yes,
without having to come back in for review?
correct. Yeah, that would just fall under maintenance. Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to mention too, because I think it gets to a little bit of one of your other questions, or another commissioner's questions, is we can look at kind of a same tiered approach to minor site plan to site plan, like minor design review to design review. So like if I was just remembering, well, the bane of my existence about 15 years ago was when people wanted to replace windows, because my design code said anytime you replace doors or windows. And so we were doing design review, and we had a design review board at the time to literally like replace a window. And it was so silly, and we all just like rolled our eyes, and it was painful for everybody. And so like we went in and did some quick code amendments to do an administrative approval of windows and doors, and I'm not saying we're even suggesting that. I'm just saying that there is opportunity to kind of have a tiered approach to like what can be a quick design review and what is a more new construction. There's a lot between painting a building or changing a door to new construction. The other thing I wanted to just note, I think it's inferred, I think y'all get it, but I just want to go ahead and say it, is that design review is a component of, for new construction, is a component of your site plan review. So it's not a separate review, it's incorporated within the review. So we're doing one review for everything for new construction, and it's not like do site plan review, okay, good job, and now we're going to do design review. So it does help and of course, as I think you all are aware, we have permit timelines, and so we have 100 days to review and approve administrative approvals, and so we'll be doing consolidation as much as we can. So hopefully that kind of fills in a little bit of those procedural things.
And then just, I guess, going back to finish off the colors thing. Yes, with the quick quack, which you saw the site plan on one of the first slides there. Yes, they have very distinguishable brand colors. They have a very bright yellow and what they call quackamole green. And it was essentially the full building, all the roofs, all the accessory structures. And it did not meet the current design criteria, but we knew that it was an important brand color to them, and that was going to be their pushbacks. But I spent about an hour or so just looking at other quick quacks from around the country and the state, where there are jurisdictions maybe with some stronger design standards or just with different design standards, and sent them back to them and said, could you do this instead? And they're like, oh yeah, that's our other palette. If that'll work, then we'll just use that one. And it's like, all right, sweet. And it came with more muted yellows and the greens being more of an accent color, and then the roofs aren't going to end up green. And so, yeah, and we don't give them any grief over their signage or where that goes. Like that's where they can really emphasize their brand colors. So, that's our goal. I mean, even something like Taco Bell, which when they converted from the 80s paint job or the 90s paint job that they had here, they did have an existing design review, and they wanted to add like neon lighting and all sorts of stuff. And we're like, well, if you want to do all of that, then it's going to trigger design review. But if you just limit a paint job to base colors and then put your branding on the trim or accent, then we can live with that as it is today. And so then that's how we've got the newly painted Taco Bell. So there are things we're doing already that'll probably be very similar in the updated code, but yeah, again, just putting some objective standards in place that make it easier to administer and easier to understand for the applicant. So any last thoughts?
Just to throw out an idea,
Uh-huh.
I don't know how much you're going to have in code as far as graphics. I don't know if you want to muddy up the code with graphics. Maybe a stand-aside document
Sure.
that displays what you're trying to say
like
in
a companion.
the regulations.
Yeah. Have a companion
Pictures.
document. And yeah, no, and Karen actually stopped me after our last meeting and asked if we were going to have some things, because I mean, we could have a 100 words that say something, but a picture, the old saying is obviously a picture's worth 1,000. So having images and graphics in there is something that we're talking about, and is definitely something that we want to incorporate. It's just always, where do you find them, and how much does it cost to make them? That's the
Exactly.
thing. So that'll be something that absolutely we want to incorporate as many as we can, and where it's going to be most effective. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on design review? Okay, thanks for that.
Did you have? Okay. All right. So off-street parking, this code's not going to see a lot of updates. I mean, the current code in and of itself is pretty robust as it is. The main updates that you'll see are the same ones that we talked about when we did the updates to 1821 and the parking standards specifically for residential parking and different things. Not much in terms of updates here. The big impact for off-street parking is just ensuring new development provides adequate, safe, and functional off-street parking while giving the city flexibility to adjust requirements where warranted. Not a lot of major updates. So how this will, some of the things that are still being sorted out is driveway and access approaches, and whether or not that needs to live still in off-street parking, or if that's another one that maybe moves into Title 12 and how it interacts with street system. And that'll be an ongoing conversation that we continue to have with the Public Works Department to see who wants to be the enforcer or the authority of access points and drive aisles and things. So,
Okay.
But I guess the other added thing in this is just the combination or the consolidation of parking lot design standards and electric vehicle infrastructure under the same chapter, as opposed to in two separate. So again, no changes, just same home. No.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission? No? Okay.
All right. So lastly for tonight is open space and landscaping. And from the PowerPoint that got sent out previously to today, you'll notice that picture is a little different. I asked Scott to take an updated photo where the actual amenities in the open space in that picture have been completed. And so I think this just does a better job of showing what open space and landscaping can do. But anyway, we're bringing open space and landscaping, specifically landscaping, back as its own chapter in code. Currently, it's kind of sprinkled throughout in various sections of code and development types. So this is an effort to really centralize the standards and the requirements so that if I'm doing landscaping or if I'm doing open space, go look at here, and then it'll provide if what are the open space standards for single family subdivision? What are the open space standards for multifamily development, and so on and so forth? And that same goes for landscaping. Still definitely trying to find a balance, mainly from the landscaping perspective of having prescriptive requirements versus ease of administration. Landscaping codes can get away from you pretty quickly as you try to cover every possible, you try to just think of every possibility and really try to require the heck out of it to make sure you get it the way that you want it to be. And so we're trying to find the balance of how do we get it so that it's easy to administer while also looking the way we want it to, without maybe getting in the, no real pun intended, in the weeds with them about how it needs to get done. So landscaping one of the main priorities is emphasizing drought tolerant native species, evergreen plantings, a removal of required in-ground irrigation systems so that there will still be a requirement to maintain and keep planting alive, but there is no longer a requirement that they have to have a full-time irrigation system. That was a thoughtful decision in collaboration with conversations with the Public Works Department on water conservation and things, just as a way to, kind of do our part, if you will, is one of the conversations that's come up is that commercial developments are, as part of keeping everything green and alive, they can sometimes be wasteful, and you'll see water running down the street instead of into their designed landscaping strips and things. And so there would still be a requirement for them to keep it alive and to maintain it and keep it healthy, but they would not need to install necessarily a permanent irrigation system. And then for open space, this is it's an intentional shift to try to allow developers to realize their vision for open space amenities and things, as opposed to being a forced requirement, specifically on things like single family development and subdivisions. So the new direction would be that multifamily would be where we would see more required open space, or things like planned residential developments, PRDs, and cluster housing, where there's maybe an incentive to be more efficient with your land, but then you have kind of leftover or set aside land that should provide open space. But in a single family or fee simple subdivision, those things can be provided through front yards, backyards, setbacks, and things like that. And so the need for open space is less. There isn't as high of a need for open space in those types of developments. The thing with open space is too many requirements leads to, like I said, just checking boxes as opposed to having more developer choices to enhance neighborhood and spaces. We want it to be thoughtful, and we want it to be done with intent, as opposed to the city's telling us what to do and where to do it. And so we're just going to do the bare minimum of what we have to do, as opposed to being, like I said, like a thoughtful choice, but for them, as, if they're marketing these homes in this neighborhood and things, like, what do they want? What do they want to sell? So like I said, single family, not so much of a requirement for open space, but things like multifamily and those would require it, because you would not have front yards and those kinds of things. So any specific questions on open space and landscaping? And then Carla.
I just wanted to do a quick add-on. So this picture here's of Rolling Hills, which was a PRD. And so and we talked about PRDs about 2 meetings ago, and walked through kind of what that open space requirement would be with a density bonus without. And so I just wanted to note that, like, the PRDs are still going to have that open space requirement. And it's for the reason that Travis just talked about. You're going to achieve more land efficiency. You get smaller lot sizes. You have the ability to have some more flexibility on kind of lot design, like width and depth. And the trade, the thing you get by being able to cluster, get smaller lots, maybe achieve again the gross and net density. If you kind of remember that conversation, is we can get some amenities like this, and the code is going to speak to active and passive amenities. And so I just wanted to kind of just underscore that like our more dense projects are going to have an open space requirement, but this is a shift in away from requiring it kind of on the subdivisions that meet our base standards. Am I speaking correctly? Okay.
Vice Chair Kuntz, Ms. Hartman's online. Would you like to address the commission?
Okay, sure.
Go ahead, Ms. Hartman.
Hi, thank you. I know I've brought this up before, but this seemed like an appropriate place to maybe do a reminder that when planting shrubs or trees under power line, can there be a requirement that the shrubbery or any vegetation the maximum height will not grow into the lines, so that we can avoid situations like what you see along Washington in front of QFC? Because it does prompt citizen phone calls about they don't like seeing it when they have to get sheared off.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point to bring up, and it just reinforces, of course, the need for collaboration with the PUD, with all the entities in play with these kinds of developments, so that those things get addressed. And I think it'd be easy enough to make it very clear that when there is overhead utilities or power, that there's a limit on how tall or how big those plantings can get.
Thanks. I think that helps all local governments.
Yep. Yeah, because the worst is when you buy a piece of property and then 5 years later PUD's at your door like, hey, we need to cut these down. Sorry. So.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for bringing that up, Nicole.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Thank you.
Okay, anything else on open space and landscaping?
And I'll add, like, this is so where this applies for landscaping specifically, because open space is really land division more than anything else. There's not really open space requirements in commercial development unless as part of like a huge master planned development or something along those lines, where you're talking multiple sites and things. Like maybe we would get into open space with developments like that, but really open space will happen with our multifamily residential, and then, like Carla said, PRDs and clusters. Landscaping, however, it's required for most new non-residential development, land divisions, certain additions, and really it's going to be how the site and the use really get tied together. I just kind of wanted to just emphasize that there will be a very concentrated effort to have landscaping standards, because as of now, it is very light in current code as far as like where it needs to happen, how much there needs to be. And so we are taking it day by day, I guess, to just make sure we're doing it thoughtfully. It's going to happen in a meaningful and impactful way, but it's not going to become necessarily like a burden the way that open spaces have been. So a lot of the feedback we've gotten from the development community in the past is that the need to provide excess amounts of open space hinders their ability to provide the development that they're wanting to do. And some of that comes back to requirements for certain types of open spaces, like playgrounds and things, where maybe they're not marketing it to necessarily families entirely, but they're also not marketing it as a 55 and up community like the code says. Like if it's for seniors, you don't need a playground, but then you end up with like it's one or the other instead of a thoughtful design choice by a developer. So it's definitely we're trying to figure out the right balance where it doesn't feel like a burden, but it feels more as a site amenity and site enhancement than anything else. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay.
All right. So we'll get to our recap slide here, and we'll just kind of a lot of this kind of got answered. So, and I really, really appreciate the conversation. I think a lot of good things got brought up. I guess starting with site plans, any concerns about how that's going to be used or what it's used for? Nope. Okay. Design review. Are there, because like I said, you haven't seen the code yet, but are there specific visual identifiers that you would want to see incorporated that would maybe symbolize SQUIM or that you think are important for us to include or to focus on? Nope. Any
No.
issues with the Pacific Northwest architectural style? I mean, no. Okay. All right. Tough crowd. No, just for off-street parking. So this is one of the things that's been brought up at the developers forum, and then is of course a trend statewide is reductions on required parking. So, and we've talked about it a little bit, but I'll just ask one last time: any desire to mimic other parts of the state or larger cities that are being required to lessen or remove parking requirements? Do we want to follow suit or keep it the way we can?
I think keep it because I get really stressed out when I have to try and park in Issaquah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I just think that the bigger cities certainly have parking structures that we don't have at this time. And so I have problems finding parking here now,
Okay.
honestly, at times, at certain peak periods. So
Yeah.
Cool.
Will has a
Yeah.
question.
I'm actually going to take a bit of a contrarian view here. I feel like depending on the standards, sometimes we tend to overbuild parking. I'm not necessarily referring to SQUIM, but I remember some of the old county parking standards were for an absolute worst case scenario, like a couple days before Christmas kind of situation, and it's just wasted space the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So if we're talking small businesses, maybe not the worst thing, but if we ever put in more big box stores, I don't think we need the same amount of parking that we might have put in the past.
Yeah. Black Friday doesn't quite have the draw that it used to, right? Because everybody can do it online. So yeah, it is. Thank you, Will. Okay. And then lastly, open space and landscaping. Any concerns with the approach to open space and any concerns with the approach to landscaping? No.
I guess where you don't mandate an installed irrigation system and yet you demand that everything is kept alive. I don't. I guess if they have a lot of drought tolerant plants and succulents would be the answer for that. Otherwise, all the grass is going to be brown in August. As it happens or when the irrigation water gets rationed out and everything.
Yeah. And
do you figure that's what people will do instead of grass?
It's a good question. And, I think it's a conversation that developers will have to have is like, what's the trade-off for them? Do they let the grass, if they do grass, do they let it die, or do they opt for maybe a more evergreen ground cover, or landscaped ground cover, which maybe doesn't necessarily have to be a living ground cover, but can be some type of other organic or non-organic material, gravel, rocks, crushed granite and different things.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when you mentioned it, Travis, because I know we've talked about it. We have had requests from the Public Works Department to put an emphasis on the drought tolerant planning and to limit irrigation. But you're not wrong, Alex, that most developers are going to be like, woo, great, and then leave it up to the property owner. Yeah. And so maybe I was just sort of thinking like we can kind of nuance that. Like I think front yard landscaping is like is the front door. Like maybe that's required to be irrigated, and then other other setbacks can have different materials or have the drought tolerant. So maybe there's some opportunity to not be 100% no irrigation, but maybe require irrigation on the places that we think are the most important things that we want to be green and look healthy. And so, but we do need to kind of coordinate that with Public Works because it was a very specific question that they asked us to consider because commercial irrigation is a significant proportion of water usage for the city of Sequim. And so it's not nothing for us to consider. And by saying this, we're not admitting or acknowledging that there's any that, we don't have that we're not doing water planning because we totally are. And we're doing water planning for our growth. And we will be talking about that next month with the capital facility plan. But in acknowledgement of the importance of water conservation is for the peninsula and for the valley, this was something that we wanted to take into account. So I do feel like there might be a balance, and we haven't really talked through that either. So I think that we'll add that to our list to kind of talk through.
Well, you're not saying that they can't put an irrigation system in.
Right. They totally
They
make
have the choice.
Yeah. Right.
To
It's either
landscape with drought tolerant plants
Zero
and
scape
conserve water and
maybe,
save
yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or they can water it by hand. Like.
Okay. Larry?
I think the other thing that we're maybe stepping into the thought process, are we going to code enforce that?
That's what I was just saying. Like if we put that into play and, everybody just lets everything die, it does create more administrative work for our department to do code enforcement.
Or if they just pave it over and turn it into
and then is that what we want? Probably not also.
No.
So, yeah.
So I think the way you've written it is probably pretty fine right now. Just not having to require the underground irrigation. That makes sense.
Yes. I was just going to say, I agree with that. I don't think we should require it. We live in a pretty dry part of the peninsula. My lawn is already starting to turn brown.
Yep.
Just part of living out here.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on that? Okay.
All right. And then next, just to kind of wrap up, next steps. So our next meeting on the 19th, we'll talk about the kind of the last things that have been updated. So I think that one will go fairly quickly, but things like essential public facilities, daycare facilities, home occupation permits, conditional use permits, and temporary use permits. And then there's a bunch of other things in Title 18 that we probably won't talk about or have a first touch or a pre-meeting on before the code release. And those are all those things there because either A, you've already looked at it as part of the 1821 update, or there's just no major changes or updates being provided at this time. So
Okay.
any questions on our next steps or? Yeah, we could. Yeah, Carla's telling me we might talk about those things, even if they aren't being substantially changed. So maybe. All right.
Okay.
Thank you guys. That's it.
Any questions? All right. Thanks, Travis. You did a really good job. Thank you. Okay. Anything else on that before we move on to the director's report? Bless you. Okay, we'll move on to the director's report.
Okay, I do have a couple things for you. The first one is I wanted to just note that the city's IT department will be sending you an email at some point in the near future, and it's going to be regarding our updated cybersecurity status and plan. So we'll want you to just take a note at that. And it has to do with something you guys have mentioned about, or that a lot of spam. And it also has to do with AI phishing attacks. We're getting what did our our IT director was just noting that like hundreds of thousands of phishing, attacks and attempts to get into the city system. So, so you'll be getting an email from IT just kind of talking about what kind of the current status of it, and they may want you to do some short online training videos, but the mantra, don't click on it. Whatever it is, don't click on it unless it's from us, right? So let us know if anything comes up that you have any questions about, if you get that email and you aren't quite understanding. Yeah, I was going to say we do have a current phishing scheme going on that's not necessarily hitting us, but it's using our data, our information that's online through the portal and through the website, and it's sending our developers fake invoices with my name on it. You'll be happy to know it says my name as a planning commissioner, and then it has an invoice for them to pay, and the payments through wiring money to this account. So it's we put an alert on our website, but we did have a couple developers that were smart enough to understand that wasn't a real phishing. They know what our invoice looks like, but it's out there. The second thing I wanted to note is that I wanted to share a couple success stories from our Title 17. So that Title 17 has been in effect for, I think, just like 2 weeks. And we had a developer come in with a third phase of a project that has really been stuck in the mud for years based on our past Title 17 and past interpretations. And we had a pre-app and we were like, you are good to go. And they were just so pleased. And it all was because of our update to our Title 17. And then one just happened this week where Travis was able to process a boundary line adjustment with the new streamlined common sense criteria. And this was a boundary line adjustment that been waiting years. Is that right? Or at least a while? They wouldn't have been able to do it. It wouldn't have even met our criteria. And criteria that we still could never figure out what the purpose of the criteria was. And so, we turned it over in 24 hours, right? And got a BLA done and out the door, at least for them to bring in the Mylar and we can get it done. So it's working. So thank you for your effort and your time and your energy on spending that. And just, again, the good work that Travis did on it, because we can tell you within weeks, 2 weeks, we've had a number of people say, okay, with your new code, let's talk. And then just the last thing, if I can ask Larry and Alex to just hang out a little bit after the meeting, I need to chat with you. Wouldn't take that long. And that is my director's report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Carla before we move on to good of the order? Okay, good of the order. Does anybody have anything for good of the order?
As regards to those phishing attacks, I could fit it in. We've been certain, you might find if you're part of an organization, everybody's getting invitations to, come to dinner or this special event, and it looks really real. They're trying to get your your Google passwords and everything.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I always look at too is, you don't always have to click on everyone, but you have to look at all of the emails, because sometimes a community member will send you an email and it will almost look like, it's like a spam or vice versa. And so I want to make sure I don't miss any of the ones. I could care less about the spam ones, but I don't want to miss one from a community member. Anything else? Nope. Okay. So our last item is adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Okay, second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, meeting adjourned at 6:43.
Thanks, guys.